Uama ke ao kaina I ka pono o Hawaiian Uama ke ao kaina I ka pono o Hawaii.
Aloha ahi ahi kako, and welcome to another episode of Kanaka Express. I'm your host, Kali Gumapak, and I'm coming to you live all the way from Puna in Paradise Park, HPP. And we have a Hanaho broadcast today with Donovan Preza, because after the last broadcast that we did, a lot of questions came in, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to answer questions that we were not able to answer the first time. And so I'm really excited that you're again welcoming us into your home tonight so that we can provide information. The Kanaka Express broadcast is primarily set up so that we can provide information that is taking place right now, as well as some of the research that my guests have done that helps to explain a lot of questions that people have. And tonight, again, the questions arise in regards to land. And more importantly, with what's taking place with DHHL and having the $328 million that they're going to be handing out to people that filed the lawsuit. How does this come into play with those that aren't involved in that? And we're going to try to answer the question in regards to native tenant rights. What is it? Because people don't realize that they do have rights on lands under the Hawaiian Kingdom. And it does apply to us now. It does apply to us today. It's just that we need to understand what those rights are. And so with that, I'd like to welcome in my co-host, and I always look forward to being on the air with Kuleana, the awesome Kumu from Kamehameha Schools, East Hawaii campus. And as I always said, I just wish I had a teacher like him when I was going to Kamehameha, because then I wouldn't have gotten into too much trouble. But then again, I might have. Especially learning all of the nasty and raw things that the United States did to the Hawaiian Kingdom. Welcome, Kelly.
Yeah, aloha mai kako, naho makamaka. Welcome back to another episode. Hopefully we get to spend a little more time, answer some more questions, and dig in a little bit more. I think that the topic of native tenant rights and understanding our rights there is super important, and hopefully we can get some questions answered about how we can use that knowledge today to help us, especially with the median price. I think I just saw one about Lahaina. The median is $5 million now for the median price home. So yeah, I mean, even that article, there's an article that came out about people in Honolulu. The only way you get a house is you have to inherit a home. So understanding native tenant rights and the cloudiness of that Hawaiian homes has kind of brought in to that topic would be a great understanding for our people. Just because, again, wow, the median price is $5 million.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. What are we gonna do?
Well, that's in Lahaina, and even in Puna, the prices are getting ridiculous because a house that I used to live in that I bought for $147,000 down on 2nd Avenue in HPP is now worth almost $1 million, and I'm going, that's crazy. That's crazy. And homes now that just 3 years ago that was bought for, paid for at $300,000, that's now over $500,000. And people are moving to Puna, and they're moving to Hawaii Island, and because the land is so, quote, inexpensive compared to Lahaina and Honolulu. And so we have to stop the influx, because if we don't do that, we're going to be in trouble. And so
we're already in trouble. They're pushing our own people away from home because we can't
Yes.
afford to live in our own homeland. So, yeah, native tenant rights, not to be confused with Hawaiian homes.
Yeah. And with that, I'd like to welcome our guest tonight, and he's been on a couple times with me on Kanaka Express, and I always welcome him because he's just a fountain of information every time we talk to him. And this is Donovan Preza, professor at Kapiolani Community College. And
Aloha.
Donovan, aloha.
Hey, aloha mai kako. Thank you for having me.
You know, let's just get to it. You know, in regards to native tenant rights, what is it, and who qualifies under native tenant rights?
Wow, going straight for the home run. All right. Native tenant rights comes from the 1839 Declaration of Rights and the 1840 Constitution. Right. This is one of the things that drives me crazy is when Hawaiians say Hawaiians didn't own land. Right. And because when you just make such a general statement like that, you throw the fact that we did own land and we had native tenant rights away, right? Like if you just make this broadcast generalization, Hawaiians didn't own land, okay, then it's not yours, right? And you know, you guys opened the show with talking about housing prices and you know, keeping us on our land. Our ancestors did things to Kamehameha III did things to secure rights in real and personal property in the 1840 Constitution. So this is where native tenant rights come from, right? The significant thing with Hawaii is in the Constitution, it states, though the land did not belong to the king, it belonged to the chiefs and people in common, of whom Kamehameha III was the head, right? So you need to understand land. The word land has a couple of different contexts, right? Land, sovereignty of a country, land, real estate, right? So Kamehameha the Great, the sovereignty was his, Kana'iao Puni, right? He unified the 4 island kingdoms. The real property was said not to belong to him, but to the chiefs and people in common, right? So that right there is very significant and is different in Hawaii than it was in other places in the world. For example, in France, when the king owned all of the land, he owned all of the real estate also. In Hawaii, you had to mahele something. You had to divide out people's rights in land. Well, who had rights in land? First, the government, second, the chiefs, third, the native tenants, right? So all of this gets codified into law. And this is the significance of Hawaii's recognition as a country, right? Hawaiians were in charge of governance in Hawaii. Yes, there were quote unquote missionaries who were foreign advisors who were assisting the king, but Hawaii has a very different political history than other Aboriginal peoples, right? And that difference in political history means our land tenure, or how that plays out in Hawaii, our land tenure evolved in a very unique and specific way. And part of that unique and specific way was this acknowledgement that the real property did not belong to the king by himself, it belonged to the chiefs and people in common. By then giving those entities rights in land, you then needed to mahele, or divide those rights. And this is where it's really important that people understand the mahele, or take the perspective of the mahele as a division of rights in land. And by dividing rights in land, people then received land, right? In the same way, if a mother and father have 3 kids and they have 3 acres and mom and dad die, then the 3 kids have an undivided interest in that 3 acres. When they then go and partition, then each of them gets an acre, right? But they have rights in the land first, and then they partition and divide out those rights. So in a similar way, the government, the chiefs, and the native tenants all had their rights recognized in land. And if you look to the traditional system, to Kalai Aina, that those were all of the entities who had rights in land during that time, right? Your Mo'i had rights, your Ali'i Moku had rights, your Ali'i Ahupua'a had rights. All of these different levels of chiefs had rights down to the native tenants. And they basically acknowledged and codified that system, right? And so that's why it's hard for people to get rid of rights today in Hawaii, because all of this stuff was codified into law. And so when people make a broadcast generalization like Hawaiians didn't own land, well, prior to 1840, maybe, right? I'll give you that one. Prior to 1840, Hawaiians didn't own land. After 1840, Hawaiians did own land, right? But this is where you're going to have differences of perspectives. People who are from a perspective where the mahele was a foreign imposition are probably going to fall on the side of Hawaiians didn't own land, because the mahele was something that was imposed on us by foreigners, right? I'm not of that belief. I believe the mahele was uniquely Hawaiian. And the metaphor I often use to describe the mahele is Iolani Palace. If you look at Iolani Palace on the outside, it's meant to satisfy, it looks very Western, right? It could be, you could be in Europe looking at the architecture on the outside of the palace. If you look at the interior of the palace, and Julie Kamehameha has done an excellent article on this where she looks at the architecture, Art of Kingship is her book, but she also has a journal article that she wrote that basically reverses the metaphor that we're all used to, the assimilation metaphor, right? The assimilation metaphor is you become more Western, you become more white, you assimilate into European Western culture, right? So you become white on the inside and whatever color of your skin on the outside. If you're Native American, then the derogatory term is apple. Red on the outside, white on the inside. For Hawaiians, it's coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside. For Blacks, it's Oriole, black on the outside, white on the inside. All of this metaphor to say your inner being, you've been transformed, you've assimilated into Western culture, right? Iolani Palace reverses that metaphor, right? It's European on the outside, but it's Hawaiian on the inside, right? The floors, koa, the motifs, kukui, kalo, all of the motifs on the walls, the trim on the inside of the palace, all of this very Hawaiian symbolism. So that for me is that Iolani Palace is the mahele, is Hawaii's transition to private property. It looks European, it looks Western property law on the outside, but something like subject to the rights of native tenants, very uniquely Hawaiian. That does not exist anywhere else in the world, right? Florida does not have subject to the rights of native tenants. California does not have subject to the rights of native tenants. Nowhere in America has subject to the rights of native tenants. The only place in the world that has subject to the rights of native tenants is Hawaii. And that comes from that 1840 Constitution. And that was what Kawikeoli, Kamehameha III, acknowledged in the constitutions, right? So initially in 1840, this right that people had was a right to real estate. It was a right to the lands that they were on. Hawaii was a very socially hierarchical society, right? We're all used to that Polynesian triangle where the higher up you are, the higher ranking you are, the mo'i at the top with the maka'ainana on the bottom. And so the higher rank you were, the more land you got. The lower rank you were, the less land you got, right? So maka'ainana were entitled to their house lots and their smaller farms. And the larger chiefs were had rights to their ahupua'as. And so that's the foundation of subject to the rights of native tenants. 1839 Declaration of Rights, 1840 Constitution. You then have the mahele that needs to divide out that undivided interest, right? So all of those entities had a ownership interest in the land. And through the mahele of 1848 and these various mechanisms and various processes, different rights, the rights of government would be divided out through different mechanisms. The rights of the konehiki would be divided out through the mahele of 1848, and the rights of native tenants would be divided out through the 1850 Kuleana Act. That was a lot. So let me bring you guys back in and see if you guys have any questions or clarifications before I move on.
With all the historical information that you provided to us, and more so especially with people that quote qualify for these $328 million on Hawaiian homeland, for those people who don't qualify, what does this mean to them in understanding that they have native tenant rights even though you're not on Hawaiian homelands, and what can they do about it? And let's bring it forward to today. How can that be applied?
Yeah, so just to be clear, Hawaiian homelands and native tenant rights are two different ideas and two different concepts, right? Just so our listeners don't get confused with that. The native tenant rights, again, comes from the Hawaiian Kingdom era and the Hawaiian Kingdom period. And so it was, you initially had an ownership interest in land. This ownership interest was actualized through the native tenants divided out their interest, or a mechanism to divide out their interest was the 1850 Kuleana Act. So with that 1850 Kuleana Act, 28,000 acres of land were awarded to native tenants. The misunderstanding or the misnomer is that if you did not file by February 14th, 1848, that your rights were extinguished, right? There's conversations in the archives with William Little Lee in his capacity as Supreme Court Justice, where he articulates an idea that is different than the idea that native tenant rights were extinguished. In that correspondence, he writes, well, try and file your claims by February 14th. And our understanding really comes from an improper understanding of the Land Commission. The way we understand the Land Commission today is backwards. We understand what they were doing in 1850. Then we understand what they were doing in 1846, and then we transpose that back onto 1846, right, when they were initially established. How you need to understand the Land Commission is what was it doing in 1846, then what did it do in 1848, then what did it do in 1850, right? Because the Kuleana Act was not passed until 1850. But allegedly, you had to file your claim by February 14th, 1848, before there was even a law which allowed you to divide out that interest. Right? So hopefully you guys all filed your claim for the deadline that was 2 weeks ago for the law that's going to be passed 2 years from now. right? That makes absolutely no sense, right? Why is the Kuleana Act passed in 1850, but my deadline to file is 2 years prior? Right, so there's some historical context that's been missing, and that historical context is this understanding of what the Land Commission was doing in 1846. The Land Commission was doing a very different thing in 1846. Then it got a new job in 1848. Then it got another job in 1850. But we understand and we think that its job in 1850 is what it was doing in 1848 is what it was doing in 1846. So we understand the Land Commission backwards, and then as a result of that backward understanding, there's a lot of misunderstandings about the Land Commission. With that said, originally in 1850, native tenants got house lots. Right, they got 28,000 acres of land. In the Kuleana Act, there's 7 sections. Section 1, I believe, deals with lands from the government. Section 2 deals with lands from the Konehikis and King. And sections 3 through 7 deal with other things. How the state of Hawaii understands the Kuleana Act today is through Section 7, which says you have the right to gather tea leaf, right? That's the one part of the Kuleana Act that has been brought forward to today. We have gathering rights, right? Hula halaus can go pick tea leaf and some of these other kinds of access rights. In its original inception in 1840 and 1850, subject to the rights of native tenants, was an undivided ownership interest in land stemming from the 1840 Constitution. So we go from subject to the rights of native tenants, meaning ownership in land, with these other 5 clauses that are part of this same Kuleana Act, to today, this current state of Hawaii understanding is you have a right to pick tea leaf, right? Own a house lot, pick tea leaf, right? 2 very extreme ends of the scale, right? And that difference in understanding is premised on this idea that if you did not file by February 14th, 1848, 2 years before the Kuleana Act is passed, that you no longer have rights in land, right? So this conversation by William Little Lee in the archives contextualizes that. And in that conversation, William Little Lee says, if you don't file your claims, you will not lose your rights to land, right? You just lose out on the Land Commission being the mechanism which is able to divide out those rights. But your rights to land will not expire, right? Kind of like, this might be a bad analogy, but right, like in America, you have the right to bear arms. I didn't buy a gun, but I didn't lose my right by not exercising it by a certain date. My right is still there. I just didn't, I lost out on the sale that the gun store was having. Right? It doesn't mean I can no longer purchase a gun if I didn't purchase it by, May of 2022. And that's the misunderstanding with the, but the William Little Lee conversation clears all of that up, right? Or at least it opens the question of, well, William Little Lee says native tenants didn't lose their rights in land. Therefore, native tenants still have rights in land today, right? The difficulty with this is we have a government that is probably not friendly to those kinds of interpretations, right? And I say that because the 1893 overthrow and all of the institutions that have followed that overthrow were 180-degree different than the Hawaiian Kingdom, right? The Hawaiian Kingdom had policies to get people on the land. That was royal patent grants. That was the fee simple sale of government lands. Section 4 of the Kuleana Act says, of the 1850 Kuleana Act says, those people without land can purchase land from the government in lots from 1 to 50 acres at a minimum price of 50 cents per acre. So you could buy 50 acres for $25, right? And this was my master's thesis. That's what I looked at. And over 167,000 acres were purchased by Hawaiians, right? And so yeah, there's a huge misunderstanding. How you bring that forward today is a tricky question, because all of the successor governments to the overthrow are trying to, right? Something was overthrown. What was overthrown? That thing that protected Hawaiian rights, that thing that was taking care of Hawaiians. That entity was overthrown, and then the entities that followed, they were stuck because all of this was codified in law, so they couldn't totally abolish it. But that's where you go from native tenant rights being an ownership and undivided interest from the 1840 Constitution to being a right to gather.
So I have a question right now. With the question that I have is that if I wanted to exercise my native tenant rights, and what would I need to do to find, what's the parameters and the rules in finding a piece of property and then declaring it as my native tenant rights for me to get today, if any?
If people wanted to push that narrative, if people wanted to push that, they could. I personally, I don't think we're ready for it. I don't think Hawaiians understand. Like, can you name me another person who can explain this argument to you, Kale? Like, there's probably 3-4 people in Hawaii that can explain this in all of the nuance, right? So it's, I don't think we're there. That would be like handing out guns and grenades and not teaching people how to break down the gun and clear the ammunition, and like that. I realize people are hungry for change, and houses cost $5 million. The median price of a house in Lahaina is $5 million, but I don't know that we have the foundation of understanding there yet. So I will cop out and refrain from fully answering that question right now, but because I don't want to hand out grenades and people go blow themselves up, right? If people want to push it, go study the mahele, you go do whatever you want. You're an adult. Go do whatever you want. I'm not going to stop you, right? But if you're asking me to hand out the educational grenades and the educational ammunition, I think people will get hurt. Because there's just not enough understanding yet. And there's so much misunderstanding with so many other things too.
Yeah. Pili.
I guess my question is this similar? Looking at like what the Kuleana Act was a mechanism in the 1850s. There really is no mechanism today that you're aware of that can. Because I think you're right. Like it's an educational grenade. But it's I also feel that it's now, I mean, we got to do it because we already know most of our people don't even live here, and it's not by choice for many of us. It's because we're pushed out. You know what I mean? And Oahu has already seen it. Maui is going through it, and now we're going through it. Where, I mean, put it this way: I put one of my homes on that I have for rent. 25 applicants in 3 days. That's not even a purchase. That's just a rent, and this just shows how bad our situation is, and not just as Aboriginals, but as locals living in Hawaii. It shows how much need there is, and pretty soon there won't be anybody left here to remember our kingdom because we'll all be living in California, or Las Vegas or someplace else. So I understand what you're saying. Like you don't want to clicked up. Here we go. But yeah, I challenge those people to go figure it out because it's something that we need, that we've needed for a decade. So I'm just trying to think about like how does, I guess my or thinking process is, if is there a mechanism, like you didn't just occupy land, like you in the Hawaiian Kingdom time you had to like pay your 50 cents or to whatever. Is there a place or an avenue that people do that process? Because um, I personally know of Aboriginal Kanakas who have been taking land and they basically just put their flag in, build their house, and go. And it's been going on for, I don't know, at least 20, 30 years already that I know of that they've done that and expanded. But I'm not sure the legality or how that actually works in today's society, as far as like, hey, it worked for them, but is that something that other people can take advantage of? Is there a mechanism that is there a place that we go to and we pay, here's our 50 cents or whatever it is, or is it more like, hey, we have this knowledge, but what do we do with it?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's always the practical question, right? Like, okay, history lessons, awesome, Donovan, but what do we do with it in the real world? But I don't, in our current situation, there is no place for the mechanism, right? People would have to be strategic about creating that. And if that's the route that people want to go, then there is none, right? The state of Hawaii's current understanding is that if you didn't file by 1848, your rights are gone. Well, if you bring a document from the archives from William Little Lee, that totally counters that argument and says, no, your rights aren't gone. And so you can say I guess what I'm trying to say is what we're missing is the government that understands Hawaiian Kingdom law and exercises Hawaiian Kingdom law. Right? This idea doesn't exist in the state of Hawaii, and they would very heavily push to not, right? Like this is a metaphoric bomb that creates chaos in the real estate industry, right? Kale, you're familiar with that, with Laulima title,
Yeah.
with perfect title, with Keanu Sai. All of these things are so large that, and that's where I understand how large it is. So that's where I want that process to evolve and be an evolution and not a revolution. Because if you have a revolution and you blow everything up, then all of us get hurt along the way. And I understand people are getting hurt now, but there's also mechanisms. If they raise interest rates, then property values go down. Like there's 15 things we could do with economics to make housing more affordable. Right? New Zealand passed a law that aliens can't purchase land in New Zealand. We could make similar laws and policies here. Right? I know they're not going to do that, but you could raise interest rates. If the Fed raised interest rates to 10%, then the price of housing would drop in 5 years or whatever the time frame is, right? There's 15 things we could do economically. There's a reason we economically got here. And tweaks to any of those 15 things could also make affordable housing. Well, so I don't know that blowing this up is the solution either. I think there's other things too.
Let me ask you this. In the Hawaiian Kingdom, when this law was passed, what qualified as lands that native tenants could claim? What kind of lands qualified for that?
That would have been the lands that they were on for the most part, right? Like in 1850, I couldn't put a claim for your house lot, Kale. I couldn't put a claim for Keali'i's house lot, right? They were acknowledging lands that Hawaiians were already on. So if you're familiar with the different court cases in the 80s and the 90s that have surrounded PASH and gathering rights and Section 7 of the Kuleana Act, you've had different interpretations that have, because it's in law. There's in every single deed subject to the rights of native tenants. What does that mean? Right? So like they're bringing, like I said, they're bringing in Section 7 of the Kuleana Act. What about sections 1 through 6? Why are those no longer valid? All right. Section 4, to those people who do not have land, you can buy land from the government. Right? In 1850, and this is the philosophical difference. The Hawaiian kingdom, land was the instrument which the Hawaiian kingdom managed people with, right? It was the incentive. It was the thing that people were enticed with. In the state of Hawaii, those with land, the large landowners, manage the rest of society, right? That's two philosophical differences, right? Land as the incentive, land as the thing, the instrument which manages society, versus people with land managing society. Right now, all the large landowners in Hawaii make the political decisions and run the state of Hawaii. In the Hawaiian kingdom, they used land as the incentive, as the managing tool, right? And that's why they were right? Like today, you're on Hawaiian Homes, but you're on the list for 20 years and you never get your lot, right? In the 1850s, hundreds of thousands of acres sold. 50 cents an acre, right? The whole philosophical, the whole impetus was different. And that's why I say it would be hard today, because you're in an entirely different philosophical paradigm where people with land are trying to manage society, and you're going to that entity in order to try to divide out your native tenant right, as opposed to going to the Hawaiian Kingdom government, who's trying to get people back on the land.
To qualify, to qualify for that, I thought that my understanding is that the land needed to be unencumbered. If the land was unencumbered, then the Hawaiians could declare that as their land under the native tenant rights. Does that apply today? Can that apply today?
If we take this to simple language, unencumbered, yes, meaning nobody's on it. Correct. It's vacant or not in use. Correct. Right? Correct. Just for common language. That, I think that would be a fair interpretation for today. So that's why you get people occupying crown lands and people occupying government lands as kind of that mechanism to actualize this in real life today.
So there is a legal defense for that, for if people do something like that, or in the example that Kelly gave with the Kanakas that posted the flag and claimed that the flag was theirs.
There's a legal. If I were to do something like that, yes, I would have a very good and well thought out legal defense. I have not seen anyone in the community present to me a legal defense that I agree with in terms of it being consistent with my understanding of the Mahele and Hawaiian Kingdom law. And so this is where we get into different interpretations of royal patent grants and allodial title and freehold title and all of these, people going out and doing these things. But in my interpretation, their interpretation has flaws, definitional flaws, not interpretive, not I interpret something this way and they interpret it that way, and it's just A versus B. It's definitional, like I say this document defines this word as this, and person B says this word means something else. right? So just basic matters of definition. And so that's where I use the metaphor about, handing out grenades, and because I have not heard anyone else articulate a proper argument where I was like, all right, you understand it, go. Right. And that's where people get hurt, because their aunties they're signing up all of their friends and all of their family, and for me, I don't want to be accountable for those people getting hurt, right? Like, I take that stuff seriously. I don't want 65-year-old auntie to go do something and lose her retirement because somebody's looking in the same direct. Like, the thing is, we all know Hawaiians have rights in land, right? That's where me and all of these other entities, we all see it in the documents, subject to the rights of native tenants. There's the court cases. Not even the king could take away their rights. There's all of this stuff that says, yes, Hawaiians are protected. Their interpretation of how to actualize that and my interpretation of how to actualize that are very different. If someone came to me and said, hey, this is my understanding, this is what I want to do, and I thought it was a pono understanding, I would say, go do it. But if you're asking me to give you that understanding, then no, because I then become accountable for your misunderstanding and for things you do and your auntie and your tutu and this or that. And that for me is not a liability I want to take right now in those terms. If people go and listen to all my talks and go figure it out and go do it, hey, you're a grown adult, go do it. But I haven't seen anyone from the community present me with an argument where I was like, oh, you're right, go do it. That's
in the research that you did, regarding native tenant rights. Back in Kingdom days, when somebody was able to get property under the native tenant rights, and have you ever come across anybody who had borrowed some money in order to build a structure on that property, and does that change that native tenant rights because of the bank now has an ownership in that property? And what I'm leading to is that, were there any foreclosures back in Kingdom days over people that held property that was native tenant rights?
Well, in Hawaii, the banks don't, I forget what the legal term is, right? But Hawaii is a certain kind of state where you hold title, the bank just has a lien on your title, right? So the bank has a lien, has a security interest, but they don't own title, right? If you're the purchaser, you're the only owner of the land technically. A mortgage and they're security instruments. They're not ownership claims, ownership titles, right? A mortgage, promissory note, these things they're not ownership, they're liens, right? They protect the bank's interests, and they can come in and foreclose, but they don't own, right? So just to clarify that real quick. But what was your question?
My question is, during Kingdom days, have you ever come across any properties that were foreclosed upon that people had gotten onto the land, declared native tenant rights as a result of that, built whatever they built, borrowed the money from the bank, and a foreclosure process took place, if any? And if it did take place, how did they settle the native tenant rights of that individual regarding the land?
Well, that would probably be kahana, how the land was lost, right? Bob Stauffer wrote a book that talked about non-judicial foreclosures and how non-judicial foreclosures were used to, quote unquote, dispossess Hawaiians from land, right? This is the interesting question for me. And like, for me, I like to understand problems and dig to the root of a problem, right? Kind of like in that Ho'oponopono style where you got to get to the root of the problem and not just cut off branches because new branches are going to keep growing, right? You got to get to the root and you got to find the real thing that is causing the thing. And so, like, one thing that Hawaiians have to think about is although the Maka'inana were given a truly awesome gift, 1840 is the first time that the Maka'inana class are land managers. Right? Historically, never in time were Maka'inana land managers, right? That was the Konehiki. Right? Yes, they were land managers in the sense of they took care of their own house lots, but they didn't have the Konehiki were the larger land managers, right? So in 1840, this for me is kind of the rise of the Maka'inana class. 1840 basically makes the Maka'inana land managers. And this is the first time in history, right? So while it is a awesome gift to have been given to the Maka'inana class, you could also say that if someone is given a new skill, they probably also need training in that skill, right? So what you do see, and this is the misnomer, right? The old paradigm is that Hawaiians didn't get land from the Mahele. They were disenfranchised from the Mahele process, and they only got 28,000 acres of land. The Maka'inana didn't get land, right? But yet, we all have stories in our families where Hawaiians lost land. Well, in order to lose land, you would have had to have gotten it in the first place, right? And this is where demographics comes in, right? There are 80,000 people alive in 1850. There are 40,000 Hawaiians in 1890. In 40 years, the population is cut in half, right? So imagine in the 40 years that we're alive, the population of Oahu's cut in half, the population of Big Island's cut in half, the population of every island's cut in half, right? So all of those people who got land in 1850, 1 out of 2 of them are alive 40 years later, right? So there's tremendous loss of land, and you could, like, who's worried about farming their land when 50% of their family is dead, right? Like, this whole ahupua'a and subsistence culture is in heavy decline from 1778, right? In 1778, you have 400,000 people. Then by 1850, you have 80,000 people. That's 1/5 of the population in that time. And then that remaining population gets cut in half again, right? So, like, looking at that era and that time, one, the people weren't trained to be landowners, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, like they're incompetent. It's just a fact. Nowhere in Hawaiian history had the Maka'inana been land managers. Then in 1840, they get that right. They get that right to pass on land, to dispose of land, to sell land, and you have lots of stories of loss of land, right? And not all of it is gambling and throwing it away. A lot of it is 1850, 80,000 people, 1890, 40,000 people, right? Like, who's alive? Who's dying? Like, if you got land in 1850, who's alive to inherit your land years later?
I have another question, is that, prior to the overthrow, we had, our people on lands throughout Hawaii. Then after the overthrow, a lot of the lands were lost as a result of, quote, not paying taxes. And so if they were on the lands as a result of native tenant rights, would there be an argument for the people that lost their lands right after the overthrow as a result of not having, quote, them not paying taxes to the fake government?
Everything after the overthrow is suspect, right? Like, this is a double-edged sword for me, because on the one hand, we have to be accountable, right? Like, if I'm supposed to do A to keep my land and I didn't do A to keep my land, then yes, my land can be taken away. In traditional times, that's true. In traditional times, before the Mahele, before Captain Cook arrives, before there's white man here in Hawaii, if I didn't fulfill my kuleana, those lands could be taken away. Right? So I want to be clear that there is an accountability in Hawaiian culture, right? Like, we have to acknowledge that in traditional times, if I didn't take care of my kuleana, I lost my right to that land. Right? So there's that aspect. Then when you bring in the overthrow, now you're bringing in an illegality and a whole overthrow of the paradigm system. Right? So let's take this before the overthrow. If my tutu didn't pay taxes in 1890, or let's take this before bayonet. If my tutu didn't pay her taxes in 1880, do I feel I have a right or a claim to that land today? No. Tutu did not fulfill her kuleana. Right? Post 1893, shenanigans are happening. Their plantations are trying to do things. There's so much context that's needed post 1893 that I don't want to just make a general statement post 1893, because everything's illegal post 1893. Right? Like, you can't transfer lands without a proper notary, the occupation, blah, blah, everything's illegal post 1893. Right? So I want to stay away from that specific question, because all of these questions are really, really, really contextual. Right? Okay. There's an aspect of it that we need to take accountability for. There's an aspect of it that if there were shenanigans, if there was illegality, if there was fraud, then those things need to be investigated. Right? But we can't just broadcast, oh, if your tutu got land taken away post 1893 because she didn't pay her taxes, go claim it. Right? Like, that wouldn't have held true in traditional times. Why are we making that argument in 1893? Right? So
the argument could be made that there it's an illegal government that is taking the land away versus Hawaiian Kingdom government. And this leads me to another question coming from Kamuela from Maui. And he said, in the Kingdom era, did native tenant rights only apply to Aboriginal Hawaiians, or did it apply up all Hawaiian nationals born on Hawaiian soil?
That is a really good question, and it's that kind of question that needs to be researched, because we don't have that answer definitively. I have a best guess, but that is the kind of thing that would need to be definitively answered before you would start making claims and pulling this thing forward. That's the kind of understanding that we need before people start putting in and making claims, right? Because you would have to find an example. This comes to a definition. Is a native tenant, like one word, one phrase, one thing? Is a native tenant one thing? Like a phrase? Or is native an adjective and tenant a noun, where native is describing the noun, right? Because you could hypothetically have a native, a someone of foreign parentage who was born in Hawaii, therefore native, and we have examples of there's 5 or so chiefs that are not ethnic Hawaiian that get lands in the Mahele process. Right? Their names are in the Mahele book. There's like 5 non-ethnic Hawaiian chiefs that are quote unquote konehikis that get land in the Mahele. So that should at least open you up to the possibility that that could happen, that a person of foreign parentage, born a non-ethnic Hawaiian born in Hawaii, could possibly have assimilated into Hawaiian culture and been operating in the land in exchange for service paradigm as a tenant. It's hypothetically possible. I have not seen an example, but it depends on your definition of, and this is where there's going to be huge disagreement probably in the comments with this question. But that's, for me, I like to explore all of the possibilities and rule them out. Native could be an adjective describing the tenant. Were there non-ethnic Hawaiians who were operating in the traditional system? Perhaps there were. Were there a lot? Probably not. But that is a really good question that hasn't been answered. And without the answer, I don't know that we should be trying to push and dividing things out if we don't have those kinds of basics figured out.
Sure. Kelly, you got
Hey,
another
Donovan,
question.
what are some of the other terms that you think that we got to kind of figure out before we can do anything else? Like how you just said, the native tenants. Are there other like big terms that maybe education needs to happen?
Well, people have to be able to understand and describe the Mahele, right? Like if we're gonna go divide out native tenant rights, then like it shouldn't be just me that can explain it. There should be 5, 10, 20, 30. It should be common knowledge, right? Like otherwise if something is that specialized that only 5 people can explain it, then that's my hesitation. Are we ready? If you all got to rely on me and 4 other people to explain it, right? Like I don't think we're ready if that's the case. So and the Mahele is so, and I don't do that so that I can hoard all the power, and I'm here educating so that it becomes 20 people, 30 people who have this knowledge, right? Like that's not me trying to keep power for myself as a Mahele scholar. It's me realizing, like, if we're going to push those kinds of things, we need understanding. Like Kelly, you would need to be able to explain it. Kale, you would need to be able to explain it. Like when that can happen, then yeah, go push. If you guys can't explain it and you need me to come on the show to explain it to other people, then we're probably not ready as a society, in my mind, to push that thing, right? But I'm conservative. I want evolution, not revolution, because this is so big, it blows everything up, right? But I understand people are moving to Vegas. We're losing our people. What do we do now? I get it.
Yeah. And I think too, it's not just moving to Vegas, but it's a disconnect. Like when what makes us unique is our connection to our arena, and if we have no ability to connect, then what are we? You know what I mean? Like who are we? So we lose an identity. So like it's really cool. I got to meet one of my cousins who came back for his father's funeral, but he came back first time set foot on the island in 40 years. We're talking 3 generations of Kanaka that's never even come to Hawaii. They have no relation to our place. Are they still us? You know what I mean? And that's the part that scares me, is that with 5 kids, when I'm gone, right? Like, will we still have a Hawaii? What will we have a kingdom to fight for if we don't fight now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I agree with you. The education has to happen, but the question is how. Like, what do we have to be educated on? Because there's Mahele I think it's a great start, but there's like so many pieces that are like that, like just Hawaiian consciousness and national identity. Like, we don't even understand so many
Well,
parts of that. So
well,
yeah,
let me jump into that, because I think the three of us, and again, I'm the oldest among the three of you guys. The three of us are uh, the proof of the proof of the pudding that took place, because all three of us graduated from Kamehameha School, supposedly a very super educational institution. And for myself, and I can't speak for any of you, I never learned any of this stuff. And as a result of that, we know that we all know that people throughout Hawaii, all of us, the genocide that took place was complete. And trying to struggle to get back to this. And I think it needs to be said, that the United States really, really committed genocide when they overthrew the Hawaiian Kingdom, and they did it with intention. It wasn't by accident that they did it. It was by intention. And this is the end result, what we're having to discuss tonight. And three guys who got good education and early on, but never learned our history at that time.
Yeah, I'm gonna not to be argumentative, but just to make a different point, I'm gonna push back on that a little bit, because there definitely was Americanization, but when I'm like, all of these things, all of these understandings of the Mahele and like Hawaiians didn't own land, that's not America telling me Hawaiians didn't own land. That's not Kaikindal telling me Hawaiians didn't own land. That's not some white scholar telling me Hawaiians didn't own land. That's all my Hawaiian friends telling me. That's all my friends on Instagram. That's all my friends on Facebook. That's all the presentations I go to and I ask this question, and all the Hawaiians are raising their hand. That's other Hawaiians telling me that we didn't own land. That's not the white man telling me. It's not America telling me anymore, right? And so for me, this is where we need to understand the genealogy of the stories. Where did these stories come from? This idea Hawaiians didn't own land, where did that come from? This idea Mahele was bad, where did that come from? This idea, because now it's us and our own scholars telling us and writing those books and pushing those narratives. And I'm not calling any individual out here. I'm just saying that indoctrination is so effective that we are now doing it to our own people. It's not white scholars and white professors at the university pushing these ideas on me. Now it's our own people teaching and pushing these ideas on me, right? And so that's not America's fault anymore. Like, we have to take accountability for that. And when we hear something, not just parrot it and repeat it and internalize it. Right? Like, this is where we have control. It's not America indoctrinating us anymore. I learned these things from other Hawaiians, but this is I need to go to the root of the problem so we can fix the problem. The problem is not some white university professors teaching me this, so we need to go fix the university. This is hey, Hawaiians, we need to get our stories straight.
Well, the question,
figure out why we understand things the way we do.
The question that I have in regards to that is that why didn't Kamehameha schools start teaching that to us from the beginning in Kamehameha schools? They didn't. So we didn't know anything about that. I didn't even know what mahele was going through Kamehameha schools. I didn't even know there was such a word as mahele after getting out of Kamehameha school. And it's not to blame it's not to blame my friends or anything else. I'm blaming what had happened that put a huge blanket over the Hawaiians' knowledge. And we
Who's
came
the
out
first
of,
5 trustees of the Kamehameha schools?
there was
3 out of 5 of them are committee of
Right,
safety.
right.
Right? I mean, Smith office is named after an overthrower.
Right.
Right? Like
Smith.
So, right? Smith office 11 and 12 administrative office is named after someone on the committee of safety, right? Like, so, and I say this as an observational fact, right? The trustees are chosen by a state of Hawaii judge. Kamehameha Schools is the largest private landowner in Hawaii. They're probably going to try to keep that institution very close to it.
Right? Try to control it.
And try to control it. And that's where you get the stories of Nona Beamer and can't learn Hawaiian language. And now we have trustees where hopefully all of those kinds have changed, and we've had slow and subtle change. But right, those guys infiltrated all of the Ali'i Trust.
Yeah.
And so I'm not and still do.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised why we did not learn what we were supposed to learn. It makes total sense to me when I know who the first 5 trustees were, and those guys institute policy and the policies that have subsequently come and come, and it, you know, it's not surprising. It makes a whole lot of sense. Right? Like, is anybody really surprised? Hey, the first 5 trustees were overthrowers. You think we're going to get Hawaiian history, or we're going to get Americanized history? But that was 100 years ago. Now, today, they're teaching different things at Kamehameha schools. We have different charter schools. We have Kamehameha schools on different islands. But yet now we are teaching to ourselves, to our own people,
right,
these ideas, right? And that for me
is this is why we have guys like Kelly and yourself. You know,
I can honestly say we don't teach those ideas to each other anymore. not at the school.
No, but we have other subtle ideas that we do teach, right? Hawaiians didn't own land. I was on Mauna Kea. I asked the question: did Hawaiians own land? Everyone in the crowd, except the people who knew me, said yes. Hawaiians didn't own land. Where does that idea come from?
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, if you've taken our classes now, you already know that answer is moot. You know what I mean? There's no kids that's gonna say Hawaiians didn't own land anymore. You know what I mean? But the generation that you're talking to is our generation, right? And you're talking about the same guys as us. Like, you didn't learn nothing. We didn't learn that. You know, and I can even say
you didn't learn it, but we did learn it, because everybody has an answer for it. Everybody raises their hand and knows something.
We didn't learn the truth. We just learned what Uncle said and she said and he said. But there's not,
and we repeat it, and that's all I'm saying is we need to take accountability for that. That's not America, that's us doing it now, and we have to realize it's us. We're the problem now, not Americanization. It's us that's reproducing those.
I agree
those
and disagree
ideas.
with you. I agree that it's not. It is us, but it is because of denationalization. It's not that I chose to share the wrong information. Is that
no, but that's how effective the denationalization is. That now you have. If I can borrow from the colonization, now the colonized are colonizing themselves.
Right.
Like that. That's how effective the Americanization has been. That's where we are in the cycle. So, like, acknowledging where we are in the cycle, and it's that, hey, I'm not talking about white professors teaching this to me. Now it's our own people. Like,
no, there's no disagreement that we have people, you know, today, our own people that are the huge are huge roadblocks, for things to move forward. There's no doubt about that, but at the same time, um, all I can say is that we just have to continue to holomu and move forward and do the best we can in getting all of this information out. And that's why having podcasts like this and you on, Donovan, and you're the biggest draw on our podcast anyway. A lot of people like watching you and learning from you. And because this is very, very important information.
Yeah. Let me circle back to something real quick, because like the question that was asked by whoever it was on Facebook,
Kamuela.
from Kamuela on Facebook, tells me
Yeah.
we're a lot closer to being ready to do the things that people want to do, because now we're asking the right questions. Right?
Mahalo,
like that.
Kamuela. Good job, Kamuela.
That question was the exact kind of question that needs to be asked, and you have to have a certain level of understanding to ask those kinds of questions, right? Like it's an art to know what the right question is to ask, and so the fact that someone from Facebook is asking that question says, okay, we are a lot further along than we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever. We're asking the right questions. And when we have enough people asking the right questions, then maybe it is ready. And I'm just super conservative. I agree with you guys, but in a public forum, I have to be super conservative. In private, when the three of us are in a garage, I'll give you guys the answer. But right, like it's I don't want people to get hurt. There's I'm not going to hand out a grenade and someone go blow himself up and he can't feed his.
Kind of like the same idea. Like you don't want to be that. Here's a small piece of information. Now I'm going to parrot it and then boom.
No, that's the thing, is we cannot have parrots. If you have to be able to understand it and internalize it to make it your own and do something with it. That's the thing. If you can take this information and run with it and go do the thing, then we're at where we need to be. If you need me to tell 50 people how to do the thing, in my mind, we're not ready yet.
Okay, right? Well, as long as you can tell 1,000 to 2,000 people what to do, then we're good. 50 people, that's not enough. Let's get to 2,000 people. Come on, let's raise the bar. I really appreciated you joining us tonight, Donovan. This was great and good discussion. And Kamuela came up with another question, and I think we answered that. And he said, "Well, who told your friends that? Was it other Kanaka?" And he said, "I don't think so."
Your friends that?
Kamuela from Maui. So. Final thoughts.
Let me just make a quick announcement, because along this lines of education, end of May, early June, I'm going to be doing a once a week Mahele educational thing, kind of like what Ron Williams is doing on his Sundays with Lili'u and Lunalilo. I'm going to be doing something similar on Zoom. I'll put something out on my Facebook page. Maybe I'll throw it to you guys so you guys can throw it out too. So gonna do a once a week, end of May, early June, once per week. I don't know how we will do 6, 8, 10 weeks to start and see how it goes. But kind of, yes, Kaylee, I agree with you. The time is now. But that's how I'm going to choose to hand out bullets. I'm not giving the missiles out, but if you want to build your own, come learn and figure it out. It is time for people to understand, right? We used to have a whole class of kahuna who knew all of the ahupuas,
right?
right? Like we have all of our konehiki who understand their aina and their ahupua'a and their farm lot and their piece of land really well, but we also had kahunas who knew all the ahupua'as, right? Like how many ahupua'a are on the Big Island?
I don't
Oh
know.
man,
We
Hundreds.
don't know.
hundreds.
And we don't know, right? And but we should know. And so that's kind of where I'm going with this Mahele presentation is, or this Mahele educational series, is to, it's more that top level, right? I'm not going to be teaching you how to land title your specific thing, but those who want to learn this bird's eye view and understand the Mahele from this bird's eye view, and this, to be able to answer those kinds of questions. How many ahupua'a are in Maui? How many ahupua'a are on Hawaii Island? How many ahupua'a are on Oahu? Right? Because that's the foundation. That's the start. That was the Mahele, right?
Yeah.
The Mahele book
Yeah.
is with a list of place names. And so
Mm.
that's kind of where we're going to start, is kind of not the 20, kind of take the perspective of the EO and look at that high level and
Awesome.
answer those questions. So end of
Well,
May, early June, Facebook.
already, Kalaupea said that he can't wait, and
Signing up already.
I got Nadine Awana said, I'm watching it, list it, list it up, and I'll sign up. So even I, an old guy like me, will be listening for 6 to 10 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever number of weeks it takes. I'll be on there. Hilly, final thoughts?
I think my final thoughts tonight is just to do your homework. Yeah, because the time is now. We need people to start learning, myself included. But it's just got to do our homework, because it's not just us. It's actually educating. To me, my idea is educating the next group of Kanaka. Because I mean, for me, it's kind of like I'm just. It's not. I feel like it's not going to be something that I can make a change right now, but it's definitely something that my kids can and my grandkids can. And so if it becomes common knowledge in the schools, then we win. The same way we were denationalized, we can renationalize. And they did it by targeting the keiki. So if we can take your 6 to 8 to 12 week thing and turn it into a class, down, let's do it. You know what I mean? That we can influence younger keiki. I'm into that too.
I just got a question from Kirk Kato, and he said, what was the counter document regarding Lee?
I have the reference. It's William Little Lee's. I forget the series. I have to go look it up. I have it in my my PowerPoints, but it's in his capacity as Supreme Court Justice. There's letters of William Little Lee, series 224. If the ancestors have helped me remember something from 10 years ago, 224, 226. I'll get the specific reference,
Okay.
and I'll get it to you.
Okay.
But it's in the archives. Letters of William Little Lee.
Okay. Kirk, to be continued. We'll get that information to you. All right, everyone. Well, again, Donovan, mahalo for, man, this time flew by very fast with the discussion that we had, and I always appreciate having you on, because the light that you bring in, and you, regardless of what anybody says, you are the leader in regards to this, and we are following you, and so we'll encourage everybody to now do their homework and study up and learn this stuff, but mahalo to you, Donovan, and Kili for joining us. It was great. All right, everyone. Well, again, this was another episode of Kanaka Express, and I hope you enjoyed it, because I did, and I learned more information. And if you have any topics that you would like to have us get experts on to discuss and answer any of the questions, feel free to send us a text and let us know what topics that you would like to hear us talk about, and I'll get the experts necessary to come in. Next week, we're going to have Dr. Sai on, and Dr. Sai is the topic that we're going to be talking about is the Council of Regency. And there has been a lot of question in regards to, what is the Council of Regency? How is it that they have authority? And we're going to answer all of these questions, or Dr. Sai is going to be able to answer all of these questions. And we're also going to take on from its latest blog post in regards to how is the monarch going to be selected. And he posted on his blog an article, and it generated a lot of response. So tune in next week, because I think it's going to be really good, talking about how we select, or how is the monarchy selected, as well as the Council of Regency, and what gives them the authority to act on behalf of the Hawaiian Kingdom government. And until next week Tuesday, 7 o'clock, make sure you set your calendar. It'll be same time next week, Tuesday, and we'll be here. Okay, mahalo for joining us, and send in all of your interesting questions. Oh, someone just texted and said that it's Article 20, or questioned whether it's Article 22. So we're going to find out and get back to you. Until then, ahui ho, and mahalo for joining us. And Lynn, awesome job.
Pono o Hawaii uama ke o kaina I ka pono